Hello, Wayne, and others. I see many others.
Hey, Jim.
Many others. Mm. Hope all is well with everyone.
Well, I mean, it's okay with me, and I can't speak for anyone else. How about that?
Very wise, very wise.
I agree with that sentiment.
So I think we need one more person for quorum. One more committee member, that is. And I know that Vivian will be absent today. Although, frankly, Curtis Young, who I thought was on land use as of August, sent an email indicating that his committee assignments are up in the air. So if he's not on the committee, we probably have quorum, but I'll still wait to see if Joel or Steve, probably Joel, joins us.
Is Steve coming, Wayne?
Are you asking, is Steve coming, or are you asking at what time is Steve coming?
Okay. Well, he's expected, right? Okay.
He is expected, but he's never expected at 7:05. Not Tanya.
Right.
Come on.
Of
Stop
course,
it.
of course.
Stop it.
That's true.
Well, I'm going at 7:05, and I have a long day that's not over yet. So I'm going to begin, and for the record, I'm working on the assumption that, as I said, one of our committee members, Curtis Young, sent an email indicating that his committee assignments were not quite clear to him. So with Curtis, we have a committee of 8 and would need another member to make quorum, but he has not attended a land use meeting in September or October. So if I'm working on the assumption that he is not a committee member, then we have a committee of 7, and the 4 of us present establish quorum. And if, Joel or
I agree that we should use your assumption.
yeah, so if Joel or Steve join us later, that's fine. But I'm not going to sit around waiting. So let me introduce myself and then have my, committee members introduce themselves. I am Wayne Benjamin. I chair land use for Manhattan Community Board 12, and would like to take the opportunity to have my committee members introduce themselves. And I will do that in the order that I see them on the screen. So I'll begin with Tanya.
Yes, hi, I'm Tanya, Assistant Chair of Land Use, and it's nice to see everybody. Frank Fazaro and it needs to be moved over to panelist.
Okay, well, that would be done by someone in the office.
Okay.
Jim, you just moved.
Yeah, I'm Jim Berlin. I'm the board's parliamentarian. I've figured out I've been on the board for 40 years now. So, and I welcome everyone that I see and even those I don't see.
Okay, and Omar?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Omar Tejada, and like Jim, I am the treasurer of the board as well.
Thank you, Omar. And I see that we are in fact joined by Steve Simon. So Steve, Tanya was just asking about you. So Steve, introduce yourself.
Well, I'm afraid of what she might have been asking. Steve Simon, a member of the committee, also chair of the Health and Environment Committee, and I think I know Richard Bass from a prior life.
Yes. Actually, she was not asking anything that you just asking if you were expected. And we'll say Steve is always expected, just not quite certain at what time, but you're with us. So that's good. So we have a couple of presentations on the agenda. We had a few others, but one was postponed, and one had a somewhat last.
Wayne, does someone have a radio on or something?
No, that's someone leaving a long message on my phone.
Oh.
So give me a second.
Steve, how are you? Long time no see.
Okay, how are you?
I'm good.
Okay, so as I was saying, we initially had a give me a second. I'm very popular.
Is anybody from the staff able to hear me? Because Frank Fusaro needs to be moved over to panelist. Is anybody from the office on the call right now?
The office is the host.
Right. I was wondering if they were listening. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's either Paola or Chanel, whomever is hosting. If you could, well, I see Frank is no longer.
He's in attendees.
Not anymore. Actually, he still is. Let me see. Okay, so which community board staffer is on the line, please? You're muted.
It's me, Paola, but what is it that you guys need? I didn't hear you.
Frank, there is a Frank Frisaro who's an attendee who needs to be moved up to be a panelist.
You and Tanya are gonna have co-host availability so you can see the stats in case you have some questions or anything like that.
Okay. So just getting back now that my phone isn't ringing off the hook.
Thank you. It's Frank Fusaro. Thank you for letting me in.
Not a problem. We have 2 presentations. We were supposed to have a follow-up presentation by the American Academy of Arts and Letters, follow-up to the presentation they made last month. They asked to postpone that. As you will, at least the committee members will recall, we asked them to meet with the neighboring residential, tenants to discuss the proposed project, and in particular, the corridor connecting the north and south buildings. And based upon that meeting, I think they're looking at some other design options. So instead of coming back this month, I guess once they've, looked at and digested some of those design options, they'll come back to us subsequently. And also they were planning on meeting with Land LPC this month, and that too is delayed while they look at what their design options are. Also, last month, you recall, we had a briefing on the ELIZA project, but for the most part, the rationale for that briefing was to ask for, I guess, community board support for extended work hours on Saturday. And there again, we requested the applicant to meet with their neighbors to discuss it, so that, if anyone had any concerns, they would have received, notice and can, discuss it. And when I finally got a feedback from the team, which was, I think, that email was sent over the weekend, although it went into my spam folder, so I didn't see it until probably yesterday. They met with the school, which is immediately adjacent, and the development site, which is immediately adjacent to the other side, but had not had conversations with the residential, neighbors, which, although they're not on the same block, I mean, they're across the street. So the question is, they might be impacted, as I think Jim Berlin mentioned, by, construction noise at, 7 or 8 in the morning on a Saturday. So that was really the intent of the conversation, not just to speak to the neighbors who are immediately on the block, but also the folks who are across the street. So I guess they will be coming back to us in December, but also, and they're not here, but I stress, I cannot really chase people for information. So when the committee asks for, follow-up, it really is something that those who are coming before us really need to do in a timely manner. And if we're meeting on a Wednesday, having that follow-up come the weekend before the meeting really is not, giving sufficient time for any back and forth. But enough of that. So last month, we had a discussion about the fresh application for 4650 Broadway. In the course of that, discussion, it became apparent that, this is the same site that years ago was the Sherman Plaza site, but also, at the end of the day, the supermarket is a small component of a much larger project for which we had, very little sense of, what it looked like, how big it was. So we asked for, more information. We asked for information, and I received a few emails that I shared with the committee members. So what we're doing now is having a follow-up conversation on the project and the application. And I would say one of the things that was not clear to the committee, and to some extent was not clear to me. I mean, I understand fairly well how the fresh program works, but given what is permissible as of right on this site under zoning and the intent of the fresh program, it's really not clear how the program is, benefiting the project. The project is actually smaller in terms of density than can be built as of right. So it's really not benefiting from any zoning, bonus. So I guess I yield the floor to whomever from, the 4650 Broadway team will be leading it off, but help us to understand, and maybe, Annie White or others from city planning can help us to understand, how or why the fresh program is, beneficial to this, because it seems like, this is a project that really doesn't, need that program at all. And I would think the other question is something that we raise, there is a 421A application that is associated with this project. And I, remember asking, last month or so, if the development team, met with or was going to meet with the Housing and Human Services Committee, which is typically the one that deals with 421A. And after, some email back and forth, the answer was, well, 421A program was changed and it doesn't require, community board, approval or input, which was, I would say news to me, or I would say it is contrary to, there were a number of instances where 421A improvements were discussed over the years, and a number of resolutions that community boards citywide, presented. I don't think any of them said that, removing community board, review or comment was something that was an improvement. So, as I said, the supermarket is a very, very small component of this project. So, I yield the floor to whomever is, leading us off, and if you can walk us through it, give us a better understanding, that would be, great. So with that, who is actually going to take the lead on this particular one?
That would be me. It's Vivian Krieger. I'm from Cozen O'Connor, Land Use and Zoning Council for the applicant. Thank you for having us back here. We're happy to answer your questions. To sort of get right to the point. In terms of the overall as of right building, you are totally correct. We are below the maximum permitted floor area for the building. For a community facility building, it would permit an FAR of 6.5. But out of that 6.5, only 3.44 FAR is permitted for the residential portion. So while we're not maxing out the full 6.5 envelope, we are getting the bonus from the fresh food store, which allows us to exceed the 3.44 residential floor area. So that the bonus is within the permitted envelope.
Right. But, but just to, not to interrupt, but just to stay on that point, because, you responded to that question with, similar response via email. And my point was, I think you're not at 3.44, you might be at 3.7 something. And under R7-2, if you went with quality housing, your residential density could be 4. So, once again, you could get to your 3.7 without the fresh program. So why not just do quality housing?
There's a couple of reasons for it, and I'll turn that over to the architect. If you would like me to give you a little bit of an overview, just a refresher on the zoning and what the project is, I'm happy to do that. Or if you want me to just turn that right over to the architect who can walk you through that, I'm happy to do that too.
Well, what's the feeling of the committee? Do you want to get right into the response from the architect, or you want more background on the project? Committee members who are
I would say response from the architect.
We can always, if we need the background, hear it later.
Okay, so it sounds like let's just jump right into it.
Sounds good to me. Ping, are you
Okay,
able
great.
to share your
Can
screen?
can you hear me? This is
Yes.
Frank Fusaro. Yeah,
Yes.
great. I mean, Ping is from our office, is going to share some drawings with you. I don't think any of these are quite yet applicable to your question, but the reason that you're absolutely right that under quality housing, we can have a 4 FAR for the residential use. But the base of the building here, in the base of the building is a school. The school is a community facility use, as you know, and the school has requirements for light and air, and also some long span spaces in a gym and auditorium, combined gym and auditorium. So the configuration that worked best on the site for that portion of the program, in order to allow daylight in the classrooms, was the was the height factor zoning, not the quality housing zoning.
Ping, do you want to pull up that graphic? I think that's helpful.
So this is an image of the school plan, which the school occupies both the second partial second floor and the entirety of the third floor, which you're looking at here. It's just under 38,000 square feet. And you can see they have a double loaded sort of corridor for classrooms that front both streets, Broadway and Sherman, but also that open space in the back of the yard, which is significantly bigger under the height factor zoning than it is under the quality housing zoning. The quality housing building requires, using more of the site for building and not so much for open space. So this program doesn't work particularly well with the quality housing zoning. Also, it's stacking an apartment building essentially on top of a school, which is very complicated for the long span spaces. So that's why we chose the height factor.
So I'm sorry, the space on the roof, is that the outdoor playground for the school?
It's open space for the property, for the project, for the residents.
So it's not necessarily the playground for the school.
I think a portion of it will be shared by the school, but it needs to be accessible to all of the residents as well.
Because I'm wondering what the school is going to use.
The school has asked for outdoor space. We're still working out the details of it.
I would think if you build a brand new school without outdoor space, one would question what's the benefit of having a new building. I mean, we've looked at in Community Board 12 a number of adaptive reuses where, and even those, frankly, the outdoor space ended up being, sort of a roof deck at the second floor or someplace else. But with new construction, I would think, or a brand new building, that the school should reasonably have outdoor space. But also the question is, the outdoor space for the school versus the outdoor space for the residents. And how do you make sure that, the noise generated during school time is not a burden to the residents who face that space. But anyway,
All valid points. Yes.
Yes. I think with this diagram, what you can see, this is a site plan of the roof, and the gray portion is the residential building above the base, and then the school is in the base. So the base is actually 3 stories tall, or approximately 60 feet in height. And here you can see the setbacks from the streets. We're approximately 37 feet from Broadway and 55 feet from the sort of Broadway Sherman intersection with the building. So the building sort of sits back on the site, while the base kind of holds the street line and maintains the height of essentially the adjacent buildings to the north and to the east.
and if just as I recall, this is a proposed charter school, or is it a?
I'm going to let the
Yes.
owner take that one. Yes. Yeah. Thanks,
Yes.
Bobby.
We're still negotiating and going back and forth, so we can't expose the name of the school. But yes, I could.
But is this a charter school that is current? I mean, we have a number of charter schools that are currently serving the area that are, as I said, that are in typically, spaces that are converted from some other use. So is this a school that is moving to newer and better space, or is this a brand new school?
It's likely a school that you're familiar with, that does have a presence already in Community Board 12 and is looking to expand their presence.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
My name is Bobby Chen.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, that's right. I'm sorry. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, Frank, you want to keep walking him through?
Yeah, sure. Why don't we go back to the beginning thing, which is the ground floor plan? We not that one. Well, this is from the grocer application. If you want to stay on that, just to show the grocer calculations. That's the fresh grocer. Those are the city planning designated colors for the different uses within the grocer. And the gray area is the rest of the building, which I'll show you in a second. You want to go next, Ping? But that grocer primarily fronts Sherman Avenue. It's within the commercial overlay on the site. And this is just the elevation diagram from the grocer filing that shows the transparency requirements. We go next. And this is the ground floor of the building. The yellow use is the grocer that we were just looking at. The purple use over there on the right-hand side, I'm sorry, all the way on the right, is the entrance to the school. At the intersection of Sherman and Broadway with that little sort of peach kind of wedge is a pad lobby that connects to commercial use or retail use in the cellar level. Directly above that is a lobby for a medical office, which will share a portion of the second floor with the school. And the blue use directly north of that along Broadway is the residential entrance to the building, the lobby, and connection to their elevators. And then the area in gray to the north are essentially back of house and parking. We have 111 cars here for 222 units, or 0.5 spaces per unit. And then I think you guys had asked for, at our last session, you had asked to see a little bit of the building and what we were thinking about and what it looked like. So we sent in these next couple of boards of renderings. You want to go next, Ping? So these are views from multiple directions. The view on the top left there from the north in Fort Tryon Park, that's elevated eye level. It's somewhere around 100 or 105 feet. You can see the buildings to the north of the site. They're in the orange and kind of rust color there, 6 and 7 stories, approximately 60 feet or so. You can see the base of our building, which is kind of light gray, where Ping has his cursor. That's the school and community facility. And then the residential portion of the building above that, which sets back approximately 37 feet there from Broadway. And then in the distance, obviously, there's some tall buildings back there over at the Inwood Terrace building, which is 21 stories, and then the buildings on Hillside Avenue, kind of looking, excuse me, looking through that kind of Elwood corridor. Fort George Hill, also on Hillside Avenue, which are approximately 15 stories. And then the image on the right is looking from Sherman. It's an eye level view. So we're standing on the sidewalk and we're looking west toward Fort Tryon Park. You can see the park there in the distance, and the base of the building, which of our new building or proposed building, which includes the grocer, the school, and the medical office in the 60-foot portion, which is about the same height as the neighbors to the east, and then the residential portion of the building beyond. And we're right now we're thinking about, there are a whole bunch of issues with the supply chain, but the building is designed to be a masonry building, masonry and punched windows for the classrooms, which you can see in little detail views on the bottom of the page there. That's the grocer at the intersection, or approaching the intersection of Sherman and Broadway, and then the school use directly above it. That's brick masonry with bay window and an operable window in the classrooms, and similarly for the medical office. And this, pursuant to the code these days, will all be glazed with bird-friendly glass with markings that birds can pick up to keep them away from big panes of glass. And then similarly on the right there, just a glimpse at the school entrance. And there's a sort of a brick panel or brick detail above the school entrance, demarcating its location. And we were asked.
I see a hand from a committee member, Omar.
Thanks, Wayne. Looking at the building and the size of the building, I'm very familiar with it because I grew up, my best friend lived in 90 Sherman Avenue, I believe, which is right next to this facility. So my question is, looking at the size of this building in this area, what's the accessibility to light, not just to the neighborhood, but also to the park right across the street? Is there a risk here of that park being under shade? Has that been considered? That's my curiosity looking at the renderings right now.
We haven't done any formal shadow studies, but I mean, I think what we've tried to do here is with setting the building back almost 37 feet from Broadway is to move it as far away from the park as possible. The sun in the morning will be in a position to to have some shadow on the rooftop of our building and Broadway. And likely, some of the park, but that would dissipate, as the day moves on.
I see another hand from not a committee member, but a board member, Liz Ritter, who chairs the Parks and Cultural Affairs. But I would point out, and this is a conversation that I had, with Annie via email. When the community board and the committee considered the prior development on this site, we articulated, a number of concerns relative to what Omar just mentioned of how, the building relates to the park and also how the building relates to the cloisters and, the views of and from the cloisters. And I fully understand that, the site is slightly larger than an acre. And in Manhattan, having a site like that is, unusual, particularly, in the 21st century. So it's not going to be a brownstone and it's not going to be a 6-story building. But the question then becomes, how does the design, respond to its immediate context, the park and the cloisters, so that it's, not competing with that and, doing its best not to, block views of that. But so that's one of my points, but I said Liz had her hand up and I see also Jim Berlin. So Liz was first.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, no poker face tonight. You can all tell from my response that I think it's pretty high. And Wayne correctly identified that I would have a similar question to what Omar posed. I'm sorry I was late. I was at another committee meeting, but I don't know if this is as of right or if you're asking for a BSA waiver based on some of the community uses. There's a lot of
it's Liz.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't say, but it's all a matter of right.
Yeah, no, it's as of right under R72 zoning. However, the supermarket component of that is under the Fresh program.
Okay.
And so that was the impetus for it actually being presented to land use last month. But as we started to talk about the project, it's like, okay, it's like 15,800 square feet of supermarket in a much bigger building. So let's talk about.
So if it's as of right, I guess there isn't really much that we can say as individuals or as a board. But, speaking personally, this is very large. I have real concerns, which this board has voiced in previous resolutions, as Wayne said, about the effects on Fort Tryon Park. I think this kind of visual intrusion in the visual scape of the community is really unfortunate. I would beg you to build lower. And I also, going back to further back in the presentation, I understand you're not really at liberty to talk about who the prospective school client would be, but I'm still really perplexed about why we are building more charter schools. Like, is that really the best community use that you could be putting in your project? We need daycare, we need public theaters, we have arts groups that need homes. We have so many other needs for community type space. We do not need another charter school.
Well, that's the reason why I asked if this was a new charter school or a charter school that's already in the community that is moving, and it is the latter.
Well,
no, he didn't say moving, he said expanding.
right.
That's
We
true.
have enough. We do not need more charter schools.
Jim was after Liz.
Hello. I'm going to continue on exactly the same vein. It turns out your building, and this may even sound slightly personal because I'm as displeased as Omar and Liz are. To begin with, and by the way, it demonstrates the actual major flaw with height factor zoning. Because if you make the base of the tall part of the building small enough, you can go up and up and up. And if you'd wanted to, you could have made the base even smaller and made your building almost like those disgusting things downtown. Now, the reality is you could get just as much square feet if you made the building squat. You get just as many apartments, et cetera, et cetera. It might take some work, but the point is it wouldn't be as high and it wouldn't have the deleterious visual impact it currently has on the park. Now, I have another suggestion, and that would be to rotate the tall part of the building 90 degrees. Now, that would expose less of the building to the park, but of course, you probably don't want to do that because the way the building is now, you have all these glorious apartments high in the air facing the park, which you can sell for lots of money or rent for lots of money or whatever you. So I too find this a total affront on our community. In my view, and insofar as the Fresh program exacerbates this situation, I will consider it from my point of view almost a cynical ploy on your part to do even more damage to us, and that will make me even more unhappy. So now again, you have, it's as of right, as you pointed out. Let me just mention one other thing. The LG company on the other side of the river was going to build a tower that would have stuck 75 feet above the Palisades right across the river. It would have been an eyesore, remarkably like your eyesore, poking out from the Palisades. And it might have been a precedent for even more horrible buildings going all the way up north on the Jersey side of the river. Fortunately, through demonstrations on the part of people from this community and others, and the intercession of David Rockefeller, Mr. Rockefeller was able to get through to the head of the LG corporation. It's not really a corporation, it is what it is. And he, because of his love for wild birds, among other things, agreed to redesign their entire building, and now it's barely visible. You cannot see it from the cloisters at all. Now, I urge you, of course, you may not have well, I hope you do have the public spirit ultimately that the LG company demonstrated to the visual appearance of this entire region. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah. I mean, I share many of the reservations that have already been voiced by the other members. And I'm certainly also concerned about the height of the building and its impact on the park. And we have a As I mentioned last month, I work for the Parks Department in the interest of full disclosure. I have more than the usual vested interest in the park, which is of course a scenic landmark and one of the best parks in all of New York City. And we have a very nice lawn directly across the street from this building, across Dongan Street. And I'm certainly concerned about how the shade will impact the usability of that lawn. And I must say that I'm also very concerned about what the impact would be if you do not give the school a full playground and the kids end up using the park instead as a place where they are take their recess. If they end up also using our playground a couple of blocks north. Because we've had a similar problem with another charter school, which ended up basically taking up much of the space in a playground and preempting its use by the community, other members, the regular usage by the community. So on both of these counts, I have concerns about this project, I certainly would appreciate if somehow the building was made, as Jim said, shorter. And I certainly hope that in the end you're going to give the school if you end up with a school, a full-size playground, so they don't have to end up relying upon the park and preempting the current uses.
Well, here's just following up on what everyone else said. An interesting point is if you look at all of the other architectural design proposals for this site, and I think if you go online, you probably will find 3 or 4. In all of them, it's a very similar approach where there is like a 3 or 4 story base with a residential building above it. But the residential building in all of the other cases was somewhat chevron shaped, sort of following, the configuration of the site. So I think you would end up with a larger residential floor plate in order to, capture the same FAR. And I think in the Sherman Plaza project that originally came to us, I think it was between 19 and 23 feet, stories tall. And we say that was like way too tall. And ultimately, the community board did approve the BSA application because they were actually going for a rezoning. They were not doing, something under as of right for a building that, as I recall, was either 14 or 15 stories. Because that kind of brought it down to the point where it wasn't really competing, with the height of, the base of the cloisters and everything. And, here, the floor plate of the residential building, it can be on any rectilinear site. It really doesn't do anything to respond to the configuration of the site. And I'm wondering, if instead of being a simple, double loaded corridor that's a rectangle, if it's something that followed more the configuration of the site, if it was something that was more a chevron, would you get the same number of units in a, lower building? And the other reason that I was asking about, going with the other option, the quality housing option is, you would get, the additional residential FAR that apparently you want or need. But with quality housing, there are height limits that are imposed. So there again, I think on a wide street, which this would be considered, you would be about a 14 or 15 story building, which once again would be more in line with what the community board approved years ago. And instead, it's like the structural considerations for the program, were the governing factor, and everything flowed from that. And, all of the concerns expressed by the community board and the land use committee on a very similar project just had no impact. Liz is correct that if it's as of right, well, actually, Liz is not correct, because although it's as of right, we can still say, whatever, we deem to be reasonable comments. And, that's what we're doing. We're saying that, you are not obliged to do any of this, but, I too am an architect. And so you can solve the same program problem in a number of ways, depending on what it is you are trying to achieve or respond to.
We really appreciate all of your input and comments. I'm particularly interested in the Chevron idea, but I'll let Frank, the architect. I like to play architect, but I'm not a real. I'm only a humble lawyer. So I'll let Frank address that one. But I think that sounds like a clever idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did look at some different shapes, and again, that long span space of the school occupies a significant portion of the base of the building, and having a big building on top of that makes it particularly complex, as you well know. I don't think. Well, yes, I mean, anything is doable with the right amount of structure and the right amount of a lot of other things as well, as so but I don't think a quality housing building could be built to 15 stories on the side. I'd have to go back and check. I thought the maximum was somewhere around 8 or 9 stories, which is part of the issue of it taking up a significant portion of the site without any open area, again, without providing any light and air to the school portion of the building.
Yeah,
and also that would be built on the street line. So if you could imagine this building, which is sitting approximately 40 feet back along Broadway, and also almost 60 feet back along Sherman, the quality housing building would be right on the street line. And my guess is that the impact on the park wouldn't be too dissimilar from this building, but we would have to test that.
Yeah, you're actually right. The analysis I was doing, I was looking at a contextual equivalent that would give you the same FAR. So it wouldn't be the R72. I think it'll be an R8 something, but basically it gives you the same FAR that you get with the R72 height factor. And for that, you go up, I think, 60 or 65 feet. And then you set back, and then you go up to the maximum height. So it wouldn't be straight up from the street. So the base would be somewhat consistent with the existing building context. And then you would set back and go up, another, 6 or 7 stories. But the point is, as Jim has alluded to and others, there are, different approaches, and we understand the long span concerns, but I guess at the end of the day the question is, how do we get a building that fits better?
We'll certainly take everything into consideration, especially I'm a little bit fond of the Chevron idea, so we will take a look at that, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I see Liz's hand again.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really perplexed, and I'm sorry to be stuck on this issue, but you've said a couple of times, Mr. Fusaro, that there are complications with building on top of the school, and because of the way the school is structured and its sort of form follows function architectural needs for how it is shaped, that inhibits your ability to build on top of it. So as a result of getting a community use facility that we do not want and do not need, that is going to put pressure on public spaces that we already have, that's also what is causing you to build the residential piece of the project in a way that has the largest possible impact on the community. So this is just bad all the way around. If I'm following the argument correctly, how about instead of building a charter school, build some community use space that we can use so that you can then build on top of it in a way that the residential base is larger so that the height is lesser.
I would just,
Or am I missing something?
No,
Could be missing something.
I would just point out, because we often have these conversations when charter schools come up, and, there are, some members of the community that think we don't need them, and there's some members of the community that embrace them and use them. And, that is a conversation, that's ongoing and for another time. But I think the basic argument that Liz is making is similar to the one that I made, that the structural requirements for the base has taken precedence over everything else, and it's driving the design approach.
Right. There are a couple of questions.
Because let me just go, because you could potentially say this is going to be a theater space or a gallery space, which you'd also want to have column free, that would give you, spaces that in theory people want more, but would cause the same structural issues. As a matter of fact, there's a project on 146th and Broadway where folks are trying to save a theater and build residential over it, but it's the same problem. You have to span the theater. So I would say let's put the argument on whether we want or like the charter school to a side, but focus on whether the structural requirements should be the thing that drives everything else.
Yeah, I don't know that that's, I mean, if that's the way what I've said here is being taken, I'm not sure that it's not the only driver, right? The other issue is that, classrooms need light and air, and the open space, under the height factor provides that to the interior portion of the plan here. So there, I mean, as there are lots of factors that go into the design. One of them is the long span. The other is, finding the appropriate amount of daylight for these kids,
Mhm.
Steve?
Yeah, the specific matter at hand that we need to weigh in on is I believe, is the fresh application itself. And what I'm curious about, and maybe Wayne, you can answer this, what exactly is the criteria to determine whether or not this is a proper location for a fresh supermarket, whether it's actually needed? Since there is, I'm told, well, I know for a fact we have Fine Fare a couple of blocks away, and there are, I believe, a couple of other supermarkets within a quick walk. So how do we determine whether or not this is the appropriate location? And secondly, is the decision to be made by the city planning, by the chair of the city planning commission? Is it solely up to her?
I think Annie is in a better position to answer that than I.
Sure, happy to jump in. So for the first question of, determining appropriateness of location, I don't want to speak for your all's own metric that you can write a recommendation. How we determine from city planning is when we were establishing which zones would be like fresh zones, they did a kind of comprehensive look at multiple factors that we determined led into food insecurity, and that included concentration of grocery stores that met a certain threshold, meaning like they actually sold fresh produce per population. They also looked at income and access to cars and other kind of factors. So this area has already been determined to be in a kind of broad stroke, appropriate location to have this incentive program for a fresh supermarket.
Well, I assume that's the larger Washington Heights community, not
Yeah, so
necessarily Broadway and Sherman Avenue.
right. I don't think that because we haven't seen like a huge influx of fresh at this time, we wanted to leave it open so that they could locate where development may happen. I guess that would be on your all's recommendation, where you thought this location, but from the city planning standpoint, we wanted to leave that more open so that we could encourage more fresh. I will say that in the new fresh program, which you guys recently heard, our Fresh 2 update, we are including something called a concentration provision, which will look at a half-mile radius so that there wouldn't be an overabundance of supermarkets in like one specific half-mile radius. But we don't have that issue here in this neighborhood. As far as the process, yes, it is a city planning commission, or I'm sorry, a city planning chair certification. So there is the built-in referral period in the zoning, which we're in now, but it will be a determination by the chair if it meets the findings.
And just to clarify, I think in the revised fresh program, is it a mile or half mile look at any supermarket or at supermarkets that were developed under the fresh program?
It's just about concentration of supermarkets developed under the fresh program.
Right, because my understanding that came out of, concerns with what has happened in Brooklyn, where there was a concentration of developments near each other. And it sort of goes to Steve's question. It's not clear that all of those supermarkets were needed, but they were taking advantage of the program to get the bonus.
Right. Well, we wanted to definitely avoid in which it starts to have we wanted to increase supply, but we don't want to cause so much of an increase in supply they start not being able to independently be successful.
Right. I see Jim Berlin's hand again.
But sorry, just to jump in really quickly as well. Thank you. The findings that the chair is required to determine that we've met are really technical findings. Their size, location requirements. There has to be a certain amount of square footage, a certain amount of fresh produce provided, et cetera. So that's what the findings really have to do with. Thanks.
Jim?
I believe I heard a positive answer to this, but my question is, are all the windows of all the classrooms openable? Because now that we know about COVID and conceivably other nasty things coming along, I think that should be a requirement for all classroom windows.
Yeah, currently there's a picture window in the classroom that's fixed and an operable adjacent to it. So a big and a small, or big and less big. You can see the rhythm of the windows.
And again, you're the architect, and of course, the key to this, the openable window is it has to, create enough openness to get the proper ventilation in the classroom, which is a criterion, obviously, that you presumably will be working on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jim, your hand is still up. I'm assuming it's an old hand. Do you want to continue through the presentation, please?
I think we've covered all of the drawings in our that we've sent to you and supplement the grocer application.
Yeah, so to some extent, and I'm interested in hearing how my committee members feel. I sort of feel that we're sort of in the same spot that we were, a month ago, although we've had a more detailed, more fruitful conversation. It feels like the consideration of the fresh application is sort of the least important aspect of the conversation, and everything else is of a greater priority. And I would be interested in how, or even if, the things that we have, just been able to discuss in more detail tonight, are going to be considered.
Well, we're certainly taking, I've been taking notes, and we'll discuss this offline together as a team and take into consideration all of your concerns. But we really are here for the fresh supermarket. So if you do have any questions or concerns about the supermarket specifically, we'd be happy to answer those as well.
I mean, from my perspective, and once again, I see a couple hands from the committee. Yeah, I don't have questions about the supermarket per se, and notwithstanding what Steve pointed out, as I walk around, Manhattan, and I've lived here for a few or 6 decades. It's not unusual to have supermarkets within blocks of each other. So it's not as if this is the fact that there's a supermarket a couple blocks away that it would be improper to have this as a supermarket. But I go back to the point that the 15 or 16,000 square feet of supermarket is the smallest, the least consideration when it comes to this particular, project. Tanya?
I just wanted to say that I think what is being said, and one of the things being asked, is that this committee is looking at the supermarket in the context of not just as an island, but in the context of the overall project, and an overall project in the context of the overall community. So it's not just something you looking at it compartmentalizing and looking at just one piece. This committee is looking at it as a whole and not just one piece. And so that's what's really being requested, is how all of this is fitting together as far as project wise, but also how this is fitting within the community. And with the concern about, the design not being the school not driving the design, but you all even say that, another consideration, the driver was classrooms, then the class was going to need light and air. To me, that seems like that's still the school sort of dictating the rest of the design of the project. So I just think that what would be nice to really hear is how all of this is fitting, is really to understand how this is fitting together as a whole. And it's not just about the supermarket. That's really what I don't know if that's understood.
I think you phrase it well, Tanya.
Thank you.
I see Steve again and Jim.
I just want to point out that there are people in the Q&A who would like to be able to ask some questions. Jennifer Bristol and Christiane Grayard, I believe. So can we allow them to ask their questions?
Sure. Let me go to Jim first, though. Jim?
Thank you. I think, and it may help, or it may not, to have the group here with us. I think Tanya's point was extremely well made. It's not just about the fresh thing. And the thing we as a community, fresh supermarket, the thing we as a community must determine, and we have your expertise, Wayne, and maybe we can, borrow some of the expertise of the presenters, but that's up to them. The question is, does this fresh component allow them to make the building taller? Because if it does, then I think we, just because of the one of these crown jewels of probably the parks of New York State, will be impacted so badly by this thing. It behooves us if in fact, like I said, the fresh component of the supermarket allows the building to be 1 centimeter taller, we should oppose it.
Yeah, but that's my point, Jim, and that's the point I made when I started.
Good.
No, I'm saying in theory, or like the projects in Brooklyn took advantage of the fresh program for the bonus. This program isn't doing it, to make the building taller because they're not limited by any building height. What the fresh program is allowing them to do, and we discussed this last month, is to change how some of the square footage is used. So, under R72, not using quality housing, you cap out the residential density at 3.44. And this project, I think, is at 3.73 or something like that. However, that's density, not height. You could get to in quality housing. That was the reason why I raised the question, because if it was a question of density with quality housing, your residential can be 4, which is more than they have now. And as we know, with height factor zoning, as you pointed out, as long as you don't break the sky exposure plane, you can go as high as it is practical to build. So it's not that the fresh program is allowing it to be taller, it's allowing more of the square footage to be residential, which is why I was asking about, have you pursued, other zoning approaches that would give you an equivalent amount of density, but would, cause the building envelope to be somewhat, squatter. And Steve, to your point, I'm looking at in the Q&A, there were a number of, questions or comments, some were Liz's and some were talking about, art spaces and no more charter schools. But once again, we're not here to talk about whether we want more charter schools or not. And, shadows. And I do think we spoke last month about whether or not it would be appropriate to do some shadow study. So, not everything in the Q&A has been unanswered. I did see a couple of hands raised in the attendees that, here we are.
If you go to the end of the list, Jennifer Bristol is asking whether community.
And Jennifer Bristol, Steve, if you let me finish, is one of the people with their hand raised.
Okay.
And so I've just unmuted her.
Thank you. I just want to thank the community board for raising all these important issues, the committee. I just thought it might be helpful to hear from a resident from around the corner who, as the building is being knocked down every day, I have come to the, I'm okay with having a new building there, but visually seeing this, it's kind of assaulting. That's fine. But I worry, and I want to echo what everyone on the community committee said about the park, especially since COVID. Our park, the usage has gone up exponentially. So the idea that it will affect the lawn is very, very important to me and a number of my neighbors, as is my sunlight around the corner, which is a very big deal for me. And then my other comments, sorry, because it was such a long time. I just wanted to say, if there is any way to do a shadow study, that would be really key and helpful, I think. And I am concerned that a building, and I'm a commoner here, but I am concerned that the effect of such a tall building on a community and a park that is as special as Fort Tryon, and to how all that green that we have to be dictated by you guys making sure there's a school involved in the base is very worrisome to me, opposed to just everything that Liz said and all the other folks said. So I just wanted to be, as someone who is a community member, a resident, just wanted to thank the committee for bringing up important points. And I hope that there will be a shadow study to see how this will affect the park. And I do hope that hopefully the parks can also speak up officially to talk about how it's going to affect that part of the park, because that part of the park has over the past few years, really the Parks Department has brought back a lot of attention. It's beautiful. It lacked that for a number of years due to budgeting, and it would be really terrible for all of that to go away for such a tall building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. There's also a question in the Q&A that came up last week, but I'll repeat it because I think Annie can potentially answer it. And, how is the FRESH program, how is that monitored to ensure that the required sort of allocation of square footage in the supermarket is maintained?
Annie, do you want me to answer or do you want to take that?
Go for it, Vivian.
Sure. So there are a few different ways that the city is able to ensure that the store stays as a fresh supermarket in compliance with all the fresh regulations. One is there's a restrictive declaration that gets recorded against the property, which puts the world on notice as to the fresh food store with the city planning approved drawings attached to it. There's also I believe it's annual. It's either annual or biannual. I don't remember off the top of my head. Certification requirement where you have to certify, the owner has to certify to city planning that it is in operation and use as a fresh food store. And then the other way that the city is able to enforce any zoning regulation is the Department of Buildings. So this is something that's in the zoning resolution. This is a zoning requirement, and the Department of Buildings has jurisdiction to enforce and interpret the zoning resolution.
Okay.
There's a number of things in place.
I also see a hand from, I think it's Christiane. I just unmuted you, Christiane.
Thank you. Yes, it's Christiane. Thank you. And I was blowing up the comments in the QA there. I wasn't quite sure if those were going to be open and made public, and I just wanted thoughts and advocacy for all the good conversation of the community board. I'm here as your cheerleader too, as I live in the neighborhood. So I do have two questions relating to actually the market, and I'm glad that this is the plan that was just brought up right here. We have traffic pattern issues and walkability things. It is right across from the park. Is DOT going to do a study about if a market was brought here, the best place for trucks to load and unload? Is that going to impact nearby residents? Where are we going to have interference on thoroughfares? I don't know where we are in that. But congestion is only getting worse in this neighborhood and around any construction site. That is going to be tenfold. And then you're talking about lots more bodies, lots more commercial space active right there. So I wondered about that. And my second question, and then I will mute myself, is I guess, what is the overall mission statement or approach to this project from the architects? Meaning, in your design, how did you attempt to maximize benefit for the Inwood community?
So I can address the DOT question, and I'll turn it over to Frank.
I can too. I mean, there's actually, what I forgot to mention was that there was a loading bay here, which is in the kind of pink area. So all the loading for the grocer is handled off the street in that kind of area on the right-hand side in the purple. And then, with respect to, the architecture, I mean, we really, we looked sort of to the adjacent buildings, to make a base that, was compatible in height with the adjacent buildings. We're using materials that are similar, masonry materials similar to the existing context. We're using some schist as the water course on the base of the building, and similarly, the residential portion is also brick masonry to sort of work with the context here.
Was there a follow-up on the DOT part of that, or was that it?
Sure. So this application is only before the Department of City Planning, and DOT is not involved here.
And I guess, there, sometimes when we talk about projects, there's, what's required and then there's what makes sense, given,
Sure.
the realities of, living and working in the city. So has anyone looked at, what are, traffic and congestion conditions like now and how that's impacted? I do see that the loading area, I guess it allows a truck to pull fully in, but that's an assumption because, the trucks that deliver are varying sizes. So, what is the size of that interior bay? And does it allow for a full-size truck to pull in and not block, for example, the sidewalk the way in some cases, you have these bays, but they're really not deep enough. And while they are, busy unloading, the sidewalk or maybe the sidewalk and what is the parking lane is blocked by the truck sticking out.
Right. And Ping, maybe you can go back to the loading bay. I don't remember the actual dimensions of it, but it is bigger than a typical zoning required loading bay. You can see the 14 feet by, I guess, what is that, 34 feet or 33 feet, which is the prescribed typical bay under zoning. And you can see that there's another at least, I don't know, what do you think that is? Roughly, 12 to 14 feet beyond maybe more actually, 16 feet north of the dashed area. So it can hold a pretty big truck.
Tanya, is that your hand? A new hand?
I didn't have I'm sorry, I can lower it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's 8:17. We have another agenda item. And as I said, to some extent, I feel that we are, where we were last month, although with, much more useful and more in-depth conversation. Vivian, you indicated that you're taking notes and I guess you're going to all, discuss it in-house. I would be curious to get some feedback from you in the next few days on the nature of your internal discussions, so we can get a better sense of how the community board might want to respond.
Sure, happy to do that.
I see Steve's hand again. Steve?
Yes, thank you. If we've, I wanted to raise another question. If we've basically come to the end of this discussion, is that the case?
That would be my suggestion.
Okay, so Vivian, are you involved with the entire project? Well, actually, Mr. Chen is also on the call. From my position as chair of the Health and Environment Committee, I've received some emails, and I think it's also been on Facebook. There are concerns among some people who live right next door about the possible dust and debris that might be resulting from the demolition, and whether or not there's somebody on hand who is monitoring the environmental aspect of the demolition. Is there somebody that I can talk to about that?
Yeah, there's actually a dust mitigation plan in place as part of the DOB requirements. And just so you know, DOB was on site today, and they were dealing with the on-site supervision in checking to make sure everything was in place and done accordingly.
But I guess to Steve's question, is there a site super, foreman, or whomever to whom he or the district manager can outreach if there are questions?
Understood. We can provide that information as a follow-up.
Is there
Yeah.
Is there an environmental firm that's been hired to supervise this aspect of the work, to monitor the demolition?
I don't know the answer to that question, but we can provide you with the contact.
All right, okay, I
person.
appreciate that. And did DOB find that everything was okay there today?
Yes.
Oh, okay, well, that's good. All right, well, I appreciate it if you could get back to us with that information so we can reassure people that the work is being done properly.
Yep,
Understood.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a fruitful conversation. And as I said, we'll look forward to hearing back from you. We have an executive committee meeting coming up, I think sometime next week. And if we could hear back from you prior to that, I think that would be next Tuesday. It would be useful so that we can, update the board chair on how this progressed.
Absolutely. We will get a response to you. We'll try for the end of the week or Monday at the latest, and we'll get you the contact info.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and for all of your input and comments.
You're quite welcome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. So the next item on the agenda is the consideration of a BSA application for 22 to 38 Cummings Street.
No S on coming.
Behave yourself.
Coming is singular.
Yeah, well, that's not the way. So it's Cummings Street. And if I recall properly, this is the Holy Trinity Church site.
Yes.
That's correct.
And for the committee members who were not committee members at the time, so Holy Trinity, actually, they were an excellent example of coming before the land use committee to provide heads up of what they were talking about and planning on a number of occasions before the project actually, got to the point where it was a project. And so what the church pointed out is there was a lot of, deferred maintenance that needed to occur. They needed, new sanctuary. And so basically, and I'm probably making this too much of the Reader's Digest version, but if we pulled up the minutes, we could get in more detail. There, the site is being redeveloped, in part for housing. I think there's a new sanctuary that will be built there. But the more interesting part of that is, as part of the inward rezoning, the committee and the community board actually recommended that the church seek a carve out so that it would not be subject to the rezoning, because the rezoning actually took away buildable square footage. But, the church was maybe a little too good of a neighbor, and they said, no, we'll just go along with the rezoning from R7-2 to, I think it's the R7A. And so now, if I read through the BSA application, which apparently was giving Jim Berlin a headache, the BSA application is to, I think, allow for some building bulk or height consideration that is not permitted under the new zoning that would have been permitted under the old zoning if they sort of asked for the carve out, which I think we were all supportive of. So, it's just the difference between this conversation and the last conversation is, we're asking, in the prior, what have you done to consider how you fit within the community? And here, they very much considered how they fit within the community to the extent where it kind of hurt them. But, that's my sense of it. But on that, who will be taking the lead for this presentation?
I'm Richard Bass. Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
I can hear you. I cannot see your screen yet.
Oh, that's not a good thing.
Well, are you sharing it?
I tried to share it.
So let me see.
you're not seeing, I'm seeing on my screen that it's moving.
No, I'm not seeing your screen. So, Viola, does he have the ability to share his screen yet? Because I don't think I have the ability to do that.
You did a great job on my intro, so thank you.
Getting back to our community board hosts. Paola,
Yes.
can you allow Richard Bass to share his screen?
Everyone can share their screen that's on the panel right now.
Okay, he seems to be having a problem, so.
Then it's not on our end, sir.
Okay, so try it again, Richard.
Okay, let's try it again. I might have to come back in.
Okay, well, you can.
Yes, I just double checked again and it's on it's not on our side, so I'm sorry, I can't help.
Okay, this is. I
Oh,
created it.
Richard, do you want me to try sharing on my screen?
Yeah, Brian, could you? See if
Yeah,
it works in the end.
I'll give it a try.
Bravo.
You guys can see this?
Yes.
Okay, so Brian, I'll just give you cues. Community Board 12, Brian, and your committee, Wayne, thank you for letting us make a presentation tonight. I'm with the law firm Ackerman LLP. This is a BSA variance application 2021-41BZ. It's for Inwood HT Equities LLC. The site is 22-38 Cummings Street, singular. And it's 2 tax lots. Lot 18 is Trinity Church. Lot 16 is the development site. Next slide, please. This is actually, this is the project team. I like the applicant, who's also known as Artemis. Brian, you're going to make a short presentation. Also, representative of Trinity Church would also like to make a presentation. So Brian, why don't you go first?
Sure. So I would like to give a brief intro on Artemis and a background of who we are. This is our first time meeting with Community Board 12. Artemis is a family-owned real estate developer and general contracting firm based in Harlem with over 35 years of experience with new construction and gut rehab projects. We're proud of our reputation of benefiting the community while building on time and delivering what we promise. We also have an in-house management company, K&R Realty, with over 2,000 units in our portfolio. While we have developed and built projects throughout New York City, the bulk of our work has been affordable residential housing in Upper Manhattan. And although that is our focus, we have also developed a wide variety of projects, including community facility and churches. Holy Trinity Church selected Artemis to partner in this development due to our track record of working with religious institutions and helping them benefit from their real estate assets, improve their infrastructure, and at the same time, develop new housing, always with an affordable component. Our mission is to help build communities. We don't construct a building, sell to someone else right away, and leave. We're invested in the long-term success of a neighborhood, and we feel that benefits everyone in the community. To promote these synergies, we partner and get valuable input from a variety of local organizations, including religious institutions, nonprofits, and neighborhood associations. During construction and after the building is occupied, we're also committed to hiring MWBE and local workers. With the groups that we partner with, we maintain a professional and personal relationship to this day. And some of the churches that we partner with in Upper Manhattan include Bethel Gospel Assembly at 120th and 5th Avenue, MJA Church on West 120th Street, New Song Church on Frederick Douglass Boulevard, and now Holy Trinity Church, whose new facility you'll see photos of shortly. And we thank you for this opportunity to present our proposed project to you tonight.
Brian, thank you. And we have a representative from Holy Trinity Church. Can they also introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Kelly Lawson. I am one of the wardens of Holy Trinity. So just here to, I guess, put a bookend on the Holy Trinity portion of this project. Mr. Benjamin, as you know, we've come before your committee several times over the past few years to keep you updated. I'm very, very excited to say that we are now back in our newly renovated building. We're like 99.5% complete with our renovation project. So as you mentioned, Holy Trinity was in a pretty dire state before going into this project. Just really not able to maintain the building, decades of deferred maintenance, millions of dollars of maintenance that needed to be performed on the building that we really couldn't afford. So prior to me joining the vestry and the board of Holy Trinity, the previous board decided, they voted to become a mission of the diocese to enter into this property deal and to engage Artemis as our development partner. From the proceeds of the sale of a portion of our land, we were able to finance the renovation of our new building. As a part of this project, we demolished our previous sanctuary, which was built as a temporary structure almost 100 years ago, and had been in use that entire time through floods and sewage leaks and mold and caution tape. Was really no longer a safe place for us to worship. So that building has been removed from the property, and our existing building, which is a historic building, cornerstone was laid in 1929. That building has been newly renovated. It is fully functional now. We have a lot more usable space, plenty of community space that's available for community use, for rentals, for classrooms, for events. We've hosted a wedding. We're getting ready to host a birthday party. We're very excited about that new space. And we also do have a safe space for our congregation to worship with street accessibility, ADA compliant with an elevator, and probably my favorite, heat and air. So we can comfortably worship in all seasons. And on another note, a really exciting part of finishing this project is that we have a new priest in charge, Father Gowan DeLeu, who joined our congregation in June. He was appointed by the diocese. He comes to us from St. Bartholomew's in White Plains, where he was for 20 years. Father Gowan has lots of great community-focused energy, and he has a lot of really diverse interests. He is a weightlifter, he is an enophile, he's a salsa dancer, he's well-read, he is a social media guru, and I encourage you all to reach out to him, to find him on his various social media platforms, which are linked on our website, and you will often see him roaming around the neighborhood. You can identify him by his distinctive and very fashionable Saturno hat. So we are excited to move on to the next phase of the project, and we're here just to support Artemis as our partner and our soon-to-be long-term neighbor.
Thank you so much. And just staying on this slide, I'm here tonight with the project architect, the environmental consultant, our economic consultant. We have a geotechnical engineer, and I'm with the land use firm. Brian, next slide, please. So the application is for relief from 2 zoning regulations. One is required off-street parking, and the other is the maximum building height. The proposed development would facilitate the development of a new 9-story residential building for 140 units. Brian, next slide. This shows the zoning map. The development site is at the corner of Seaman and Cumming. The church is mid-block between Seaman and Broadway on the south side of Cumming. Next. Here's a tax map, again showing the 2 tax lots. It's considered one zoning lot. Lot 16 is the development site. Lot 18 is the Holy Trinity site. Next. Here are some pictures that show the difficulty, and I'll go into greater detail, but a variance has to demonstrate to the BSA that there's a unique physical hardship that stops you from doing an as-of-right development. And some of these pictures will give you an idea, if you haven't visited the site, what the rock outcropping means to the site. Next slide. The site also, because of the rock outcropping, is elevated compared to the rest of the neighborhood. We're between 15 and 45 feet above the sidewalk. Next slide. Actually, I love this picture. This is a picture of the rock itself from the neighboring building on the south. We're standing southwest. We're standing in the alleyway. This is what would have to be removed to build an as-of-right building. Next slide. As the representative said, the Trinity Church is in a partnership with my client Artemis. This creates a dynamic that allows the church to remain in this community. And we'll show you some of the pictures of our architect, and Artemis did the actual work in the church. Next slide. We're going to show you some before and after pictures. This is before the improvements. They're not as dramatic as one can imagine if you've been in the church or experienced the lack of heat or air conditioning. Next slide. Now, the exterior and interior work was designed by our project architect, so it was not only a partnership in terms of us acquiring the church site, but it was our architect and Artemis's contractors who did the design work, did the filing at DOB, and actually did the improvements to the church. As you can see, this is a dramatic after picture. Next slide, please. Again, a vast improvement. Next slide, please. For the BSA variance application, we have to show what a quote unquote as of right development is so we can compare the as of right with the proposed. So under the R7A zoning, a 7-story building could be developed with 94 units, and 50% of the units would have parking at 48 parking spaces, a little shy of 85,000 square feet. The R7A allows a 4.0 maximum FAR. This building would be only 3.18 FAR because of the constraints of the site. The maximum height is 80 feet. The bedrock that I showed you pictures of would take a year to excavate. In the old days, you could just blast. So what happened 100 years ago, and as this neighborhood was developed, literally dynamite was used to remove the bedrock. Now we would do 12 months of at hand and machine removal of the bedrock, which would be noisy, vibrations, and dust. Also, the most important thing, it's not financially feasible to build these parking spaces and build the picture I'm showing in this slide. Next slide, please. The proposed building is a 9-story building, so it would be 14 feet taller than the as of right building. It would be a little over 99,000 square feet, and again, below the maximum 4.0 FAR at a 3.71 FAR. It would have a building base of 66.5 feet, which is in keeping with the neighborhood built condition, and it would then set back and rise to 94.5 feet. This project is economically feasible. Next slide, please. There are 5 required findings in a variance application. The first one is the unique physical conditions. As you can see at the bottom picture, it's showing another picture of the bedrock, but the bedrock elevation, the different colored plan shows how the location of the bedrock and the height of the bedrock. This is what would have to be removed, and this is our unique physical condition. We surveyed the neighborhood. There are no other soft sites that have this exact condition that would have to be removed. Next slide, please. The second one is that there has to be a financial feasibility to show what the cost of removing the bedrock. We have economic analysis that would be over $3 million, or about $68,000 per parking spot to remove this bedrock. And as you can see from this graphic, what it would take to remove the bedrock to allow an as-of-right building. Next slide, please. The 3 other findings are neighborhood character. This is a residential building proposed in a residential neighborhood. It's consistent with the multifamily context. It's a block and a half from the Dyckman A-train subway station. There's parking nearby. There's buses on Broadway. The 4th finding I always find a little amusing. It's not a self-created hardship. We didn't put this bedrock there. It's been there for 1 million years. And the 5th finding, which is part of the economic analysis that we show to the BSA, is that this is the minimum variance required. We're not proposing a 30-story building. We're proposing a 9-story building because that's what it would take to make a reasonable rate of return for this particular site. Next slide, please. That basically is a nutshell of my presentation. We have our project team available if there's specific questions that I can't answer. But Mr. Chairman, I turn it back to you. If you
could you go back to the slide that shows the proposed building?
Go back, that one, right there.
So the building on the left, is that the renovated sanctuary?
That's correct. That is the church, the historic church building.
Okay, and so as I recall, that church building, is that National Register eligible?
I believe it is.
Okay, and so
I'm sorry. It was considered, and then I believe that the claim was rejected. So
on what basis?
I'm not sure. That predates my time on the board, and as you know, our previous vicar has moved on to another parish. So I don't have all of the particulars. I'll certainly see if there's some institutional knowledge available that I can share with you. I know that it was submitted and was not accepted.
Right, I seem to recall it was designed by a fairly notable architect.
Yes, John Russell Pope.
Right, and so the other question is, I understand the BSA findings, and I understand that it's residential in a residential neighborhood, but I'm wondering if there's anything more developed architecturally than these massing drawings. My question is, architecturally, how does it fit in the community? That's a conversation we have on an ongoing basis. This site is not that far from the Eliza, and with that, although in their presentation they spoke about the Art Deco influences and how the Art Deco style is something that is part of the context. When you look at their proposed design, there's nothing that feels the least bit informed by the neighboring buildings. The color is kind of a gray institutional brick. So, you know, that building, you know, is actually taller than yours, but it's just architecturally, it had nothing to do with the neighborhood. So I'm wondering, is there anything that gives us a better sense of architecturally, you know, how this building relates to the context within which it's being built?
Well, I'll let the architect speak to the specific design of the building. We're showing the massing that's in keeping with the zoning requirements. Also, the base of the building reflects the height of the neighboring buildings. Most of the buildings in the neighborhood are 60 to 65 feet tall, so our base is contextual to that, and therefore we have that setback.
No, I understand, but you know, some of the conversation about contextual is very minimal. It's like, okay, it's the same height and it's the same use, but in terms of architectural design, it's night and day. So I'm asking about the proposed architectural design, and if it's. And the other architectural question is, you know, it is phenomenally expensive to hand excavate the rock. So how are you handling the rock in construction of this building?
We're leaving most of the rock in place. That's the cost savings. But let me, Shai, are you able to chime in and we can show some, you can describe in greater detail the design of the building, the articulation and the facade treatment?
Yes, thank you, Richard. My name is Shai Alstra. I'm from GF55 Architects. We didn't really dive into the design of the building per se yet, because we obviously wanted to know first what the, massing of the building is how it's going to shape and what we're going to end up able to build there. And but like any other building that we have built so far in Harlem and elsewhere, really, and we built a lot together with Artemis, we always being contextual, both in color of the brick or the masonry, meaning the material that we address the building with. We always looking at the surrounding buildings around us to make sure that we are respectful of their certain heights and setbacks, and we work with the shapes and size of building openings and entrances. We locate the entrances at these strategic locations so that it will work with the traffic in the neighborhood and with the really the surrounding area. So if you look, I understand there is no certain style that you can read from the massing diagram at this moment, but this is always our intention to keep contextual. And obviously we worked on the building next door, which is the church. We renovated the building next door, and we made sure to even keep as much as we could from the previous building there. And we're proposing something that we believe is more respectful in a way, even massing wise, because the building, and if Brian can go one slide previous to this one, there you go. This building is actually, in order to use the FAR and use what we're allowed to use here, we have to cantilever over the entire entrance into the church on the right side, where at the moment it's really an open space. So it's really a less desirable condition that we propose here. So I'll just end it here, and if you have more questions or if anybody else from maybe Barry want to expand on it.
I did want to add something. Richard, hi, this is Barry Gervich. I'm not sure if everyone could see me. I'm the CEO of Artemis Construction. And just one thing further to what Shai mentioned, and I think, Brian, if you go back, there's a photo of the renovation. This was something that Shai was insisting on. Come back, next one. You'll see there on the right, that's a remnant of the connection to the original worship hall. We've saved that wall. There's nothing behind there. We've saved that wall. That's why you see a crossbeam stabilizing it, with the intention that it's going to be incorporated into the new building that Shai and his team are going to design. So that area is kind of was somewhat of a courtyard that's going to be facing both the new structure and the old. And this just gives you a hint of where Shai's head was at as far as being, you can't get more contextual than saving part of the existing building.
And Mr. Benjamin, I know you've probably heard this before, but Artemis and this architect, Shai, are committed to working with the community board as we develop greater details on the design of the building. We'll be back with the community board so that we're not, showing up tonight and saying thank you and disappearing.
I'm actually familiar with Artemis from another life, and I believe I'm also familiar with the architect from another life. But I mean, it's good to hear that the relationship heretofore with the church has been, they've been very forthcoming in, updating us and keeping us informed and coming before us and reaching out to us. So and once it went into because the RFP process, there was, I guess, a lot less that could be communicated. So if the intention is for the communication that had been sort of open and ongoing in the past to resume, I would say that's a good thing to hear.
Well, we intend to do that, but also, if I didn't make this really clear, this is a partnership between the church and Artemis, and that partnership is long-term. And the church isn't going away and Artemis isn't going away. So we will continue that dialogue with the community board going forward.
I see two hands. I don't know who is first. I'm just going to start on one side and move to the other. So Steve.
I have two questions. Let's stay with the slide that's up on the screen. That entrance to the church, is that on the side of the building, or is that facing Cummings Street?
So the rounded red doors are that is the old entrance to the building. So that to get to that entrance, you have to go up the stairs, which are sort of in the middle of Cummings Street. And then the image to the left of that is the new street level access,
Okay.
which is also on Cummings Street.
Okay, so the image, the photo on the right side with the rounded arch, that's going to face the side of the new building. Is that correct?
Correct.
So so it looked, and this old piece that's being preserved is that the width of the open space that will be between the two buildings?
More or less.
And all right, well, so there's going to be a decent amount of open space if you have the 9-story building separating the apartment building from the church. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yes, I'd like to say to the point that Artemis is making, that when Holy Trinity decided to partner with Artemis, we had several answers to our RFP. And the reason that we chose Artemis is because of their history of working with religious institutions. And we did feel really comfortable having them as a partner, that they would, respect our wishes as much as possible, building on a piece of land that we no longer own, but that they would be great neighbors and partners to us.
All right, so I'm glad to see that there's going to be a fair amount of space separating the church building from the apartment building. I'm also curious on the south side, the amount of space that will separate the new building from what I believe is number 9 Seaman Avenue. Is how much space will separate that building from the apartment building to the south?
Guy, can you answer that?
Yes, so there will be a minimum of 30 feet there, as required for the opening of the, for air and light for these apartments. So there will be actually a little bit more than 30 feet.
All right. Well, that's good. All right, now keep this image on the screen, because this is my next question. It looks as though the the entrances to the apartment building are right on street level. So how are you overcoming the bedrock in order to create the entrances down right on the street level?
Should I answer that, Shai?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, we cannot avoid excavating anything, but for the purpose of having an entrance into the site, we would have to excavate some portion, to allow at least for the lobby entrance and some utility lines.
All right, so okay, that's what I thought. So you're gonna have to do some amount of excavation.
Yeah, well, that was my question, Steve, as you recall. It's like, what are you doing with the rock? Because
yeah,
right. There's going to be
Right.
some,
So you'll
also
notice
there's stairs there now.
exactly. So we chose the location which had somewhat been previously cut. And the intention is to minimize it. So as Shai mentioned, we're going to have an entrance that's ADA accessible, a small lobby with the elevator. And on the right is just whatever minimal we need for utilities, just to bring in to the site. That's it. So there will be some, but we're going to minimize it considerably.
So conceptually, at sidewalk level, it's basically, the lobby and the elevator lobby, and any, actual habitable space is basically 1 story or whatever the elevate up.
Correct.
Exactly.
Jim?
This is just idle curiosity. What actually is the bedrock made out of? What rock?
You mean, is it schist?
Well, up there it might be dolomite, which is much easier to get through. So that's why I'm curious. Or it might be a schist outcropping. Don't know.
I believe it's mostly schist. We actually had a visit from one of the park rangers at Inwood Hill Park who gave an analysis of the rock for the congregation. I believe it's mostly schist, and I believe that there's also a report and a recording of the interview, which I will find and send along to the board for your information.
Thank you.
Well, if I could just on that, because I took a very fine geology course at City College many years ago, but I don't think rocks have changed much. And schist, in fact, has bankrupted demolition companies, because unless you put the blast hose close enough when you set off all the dynamite, which you're not going to do anyway, nothing happens. So I totally concur that and in fact, across the street from where I live, they tried getting rid of some schist and had real problems too. And there is an S in that word, 2 S's. But the point is that I totally concur. If it's schist, you're not going to budget.
Right. James, just to add in one little point, I actually took a geology class at City College also. Not sure if we were there at the same time.
Maybe. Well, we're both in the same grand alma mater.
Yeah, well, I did not take a geology class at City College, but I did get my bachelor's of architecture from City College. So,
okay.
And City
Look
College,
at that.
at least the Gothic buildings are, the exterior is in fact schist.
I love those buildings.
Yeah.
Oh, are they beautiful?
But the point that the team made is really quite valid. A century ago, blasting is fine. We're not going to be blasting this rock today.
No.
Wayne,
yes.
Christiane had a question about the bedrock. Do you want her to be able to ask that? Because she said that, she had a question about the bedrock as someone, as a resident tenant rep of the building directly behind.
Christiane, go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. And I guess it's not so much as a question as a sincere hope that there is a truly open dialogue with the residents at the building on Seaman 1 through 19 directly to the south of this. We did, first off, congratulations to Holy Trinity. We think that the space is amazing. Many of us have, been members up there, attended the consecration. We think it's a lovely job, and we were partners with you too throughout that, as many of our windows face your property, as our alleyways connect directly to that. And so we were affected by debris and sound for many, 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 many months. So some of these slides are very scary to us. I've screenshotted them and they will be going to our tenants association because we do have concerns about the wall that is there now, this bedrock. Some of us, when we go out to take our trash, are terrified that it is going to crumble on top of us. We really have fallen into a strange area of everybody telling us that they're not the ones in charge of it, from our landlords to reps at the church. And so we know that really needs to be part of this process, just some peace of mind and assurances, and real clarity on how that is going to be a secure space and no one needs to fear rocks tumbling into their living room.
Well, I mean, the rock is clearly an integral part of the site, which is why it's causing such problems. But I wonder if the team could address how the rock.
They don't have to address that right now.
I'm just saying
they need to address it soon and with us, and we'd just like to be part of that dialogue as members of.
Right, but I'm saying for right now, like 2 minutes, because I mean, it's part of the construction process. How would any stabilization of rock that is necessary, how would that be handled? Because I'm sure the building department would require that.
There's a two-part answer to this. The first part is we will continue our commitment to meet and advise the community of what's going on with the project. Barry, I'll defer to you. I haven't built any buildings. What are some of the construction management issues that you'll address?
Well, the best way to describe it is what we already started doing on that wall as it goes further, but actually behind the current church building. And we worked with that neighbor and we installed special rock netting to protect, to hold the wall together and to prevent any pieces from falling down. And so something similar to that certainly would be part of the scope of when we do develop this property. So we're aware of it and we'll do the appropriate things to make sure it's safe.
I also see a hand from Nancy Preston.
Yeah, well, could I just interrupt for a moment? Christiane, did you say that the address of that building is number 19?
Okay, I can answer that.
Yes, Nancy can answer that.
Yeah.
She's in the same complex.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this is a 1 through 19 is the building complex, but the two buildings that face the church property are number 15 and 17, and I live in 17.
Okay.
First I want to say what a wonderful job of the renovation of the church building that was done. I was in there, and it really hats off to that job. And so we hope that this next building will please us as well. You've heard our concerns as residents next door, especially because of the wall, the retaining wall, and with excavation going on. So there's certainly concern there. And living right against it, I will confirm that not only was there netting, there was also a scaffolding put up, because that alley is used for garbage. So there was care taken to protect us along the way. But my question is, so in the BSA variance, and you're asking to go from 7 to 9 stories, and you're asking for not to require the parking. And so my question really on this is, if you're going to 140 units, there was said to be an affordable component of housing, but what would be the component of market rate housing? Because it stands to reason that people coming in at market rate are very likely to have vehicles. And we all know the parking situation in this neighborhood is untenable, including in the garages. So I'd sort of like to have an idea of that if you're that far in the design that you could answer that. Yeah, and that's, and of course, we'd love to continue to have conversations open along the way. So those are my questions. Thank you.
I would piggyback on Nancy's question to say, I mean, you know, not just what's the breakdown between the affordable and the market rate, but what is defined, what's the level of affordability? I know that's a conversation we started to have with the church years ago, but it was premature because the developer had not yet been selected. But you know, we now have one, and I happened to see an article that I passed along to Gail Brewer last week, where there's a new 100% affordable housing project in East Harlem. However, their affordability begins, I think, at 58,200 household income and goes up to 137,000. If you know the demographics of most of Upper Manhattan, but certainly Community Board 11, the AMI in the area probably doesn't reach 58,000. It might be in the mid to high 40s. So for that community, that affordable housing development is not affordable.
Well, let me kind of address a number of different issues, both on parking and affordability. First of all, in a variance application, there is no city subsidy. The BSA views any affordable housing as adding to the hardship, and that becomes a self-created hardship. So in a rezoning, there's city subsidy, and that can be negotiated. And I do a lot of rezonings throughout the city. I'm doing 100% at 50% AMI in East New York. But in a variance application, there is no city subsidy.
We understand that, Richard. We're not talking about it in the context of the BSA application. As Tanya pointed out for the other project, we're talking about it in the overall context of the community. And you can go to HPD or HDC, and you know, and Artemis knows this because they've done a lot of affordable housing and all. You can go to HPD or HDC, or for that matter, the state, and get financing that will support affordable housing, development. So the basic question is, what are you thinking about vis-a-vis affordability? I mean, the affordability is thrown around quite liberally, but in many cases, when you look at the rent and the household income that's required to afford it, it's not affordable for the area, so it might as well be market.
I understand that. Again, I don't mean to sound like a technocrat here, but the BSA in their financial analysis only looks at what we can do in terms of the marketplace. We can do 421A, which would require that 42 units be affordable and 98 would be market. All 140 units would be rent stabilized for the life of the 421A program, which is 35 years. And the difference between quote unquote market and the affordable on the 421A is basically the same in this neighborhood. In terms of going outside of the BSA program, I'm not familiar with any HDC or HPD financing of variance applications.
No, we're not talking about the variance application. We're talking about the project as a project. It's going to be financed. It's not going to be built with cash out of someone's pocket. So the question is, putting aside the BSA variance, as you're looking at, how you are proceeding, and years ago, HPD and HDC made a point that they were willing to speak to folks who were developing on non-city sites to let them know about the funding options available. So this will be a perfect opportunity to have those conversations to see, if there are things that can be brought into the development project to help enhance the affordability level. But my point is, Artemis is a very knowledgeable, affordable housing developer. I'm not saying anything that they don't know.
Again, I hear you, and I can discuss it with my client, but I can't have a conversation at the community board about city subsidy at the same time speaking to the BSA about.
We're not asking you to do that for the third time. The same way that residents are saying, wonderful job with the renovation. We're looking forward to this, but be mindful of X, Y, and Z as you move forward, and be sure to keep us in the mix. I'm saying the BSA application and what's requested is one thing, but we're talking beyond the technical to the project in general and what it's going to yield at the end of the day. And I think we're all sophisticated enough to understand that, we can, compartmentalize and say, yeah, we understand what's required for BSA. Now let's talk about the architecture. Now let's talk about the affordability. Let's talk about X, Y, and Z. And, so that's what I'm doing. I'm saying, as we look at that, it's great to say that there are 42 affordable, 90 market. And I've also heard in some cases, developers point out that given what are market conditions, there isn't a big difference between the affordable and market, although that varies because you do have income strata in this community that's quite, different. There's some who are much better off than others. So it's kind of going beyond the BSA application into what is the development team thinking about, in particular, as it pertains to affordable housing, which is such a critical need in this community all over Upper Manhattan, but to be honest, throughout the city of New York.
Mr. Benjamin, you're absolutely right. Artemis knows affordable housing. I think, and Barry, you can jump in, but I think at this point, all I can do is promise is after the BSA approval, we can have a deeper conversation about levels of affordability. But I honestly can't have that conversation and then present at the BSA.
I guess, Richard, at the end of the day, we're not asking you to answer that. We're really asking the development team to answer. So we understand what you're saying, but to some extent, what we're looking for, and at least what I'm looking for, what I'm looking to hear, is not the attorney for the developer telling us what they can and cannot discuss. But I'm looking for the developer to tell us what they're thinking about, how they're approaching it, and hearing what we are saying, how they're going to try to enhance affordability as much as is practical and feasible. And so I don't need to, so I don't need to hear a long answer to that now, but I just want to frame, what I'm asking.
Okay, we hear you.
Richard, do you want me just to jump?
Come back to you.
Barry?
Yeah, Richard, I'll just add one quick word, just a quick response, and I agree we could get back to. I think the best way to describe it's almost a catch-22, meaning the site is challenging in its own right and expensive to develop as of right. If you add in there a mix of low affordable housing even with city subsidy, it would be even more undoable. So, and as Richard said, to get away, the only approach to avoid the challenge there is through the BSA. So there's the catch-22.
Yeah, not quite. Anyway, I've said my piece, and I think although we're dancing around it, I'm sure you fully understand what I'm saying.
We clearly hear you and we understand.
Steve?
I could be wrong, but isn't there a requirement that all housing developed in the rezoning area has to include some element of affordable housing?
No, not this site, and the BSA process is outside of of that level of affordability. The rezoning reduced the FAR on the site, created some bulk regulations, but it doesn't address unique physical hardship. That's where the variance and the BSA comes in. You need a relief valve for specific sites like ours.
We understand that. I think Steve's question goes to, I think there are some sites in the inward rezoning where MIH is applicable, but the
this is not one of them.
but the R7A sites are not those sites, Steve.
Okay. And did I understand you to say maybe that Richard, that the project developer would be seeking 421A benefits, or was that did you throw that out as a hypothetical?
No, we would be seeking 421A.
All right. So and what you're saying is that under 421A, only 42 of the 140 units would be affordable.
Right. That would be 30% of the units.
Right. All right, but so that is a definite. There will be a minimum of 42 units.
Right.
But again, it's affordable as defined by the metropolitan area AMI, which is beyond what our community generally.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, obviously there's a concern about introducing a large number of market rate apartments into the community, and what that will result in terms of the pressure on landlords trying to deregulate and increase rents on existing rent regulated apartments. So would appreciate it if you would keep that in mind.
We hear you.
So Nancy, is your hand up from before, or is this a new hand?
Apologies. I took it.
No problem. And Steve, I take it your hand is down now. So it's like 9:17. I guess the question is, at this juncture, what are you looking for from the community, from the committee, and what's your schedule vis-a-vis BSA?
I have an answer and a question back to you. Our hearing is mid-December. We would obviously love a positive resolution from the committee and the community board. And my question back to you is, how do you do full board hearings? Do we make a presentation at the full board?
We don't do full board hearings. The committee passes a resolution. The resolution goes to the general board to adopt. I mean, in theory, during public session, anyone could speak. So if you wanted to do like a 3-minute quickie, but I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, on the other hand, the church representatives might want to, during public session, just kind of, reintroduce themselves in the project and ask for the rest of the board to support the resolution, assuming that, the committee, does that. But it's all like the hard work and the detailed work is done at the committee level, not at the general board.
I appreciate that information. It's been a while since I presented at CB12, and each community board is a little different.
Yeah. I mean, I've been at other general meetings where it's like they're having the committee discussion in the general board meeting, and those meetings go on forever.
Right.
So I guess my question, I see we have another hand from, is it Reverend or Pastor?
Pastor is fine, Father is fine, but really call me Gowan, especially since other people aren't using titles. So I'm fine with that. So Pastor is also technically correct for all religious, for all Christian denominations. So I just wanted to have a moment just to introduce myself. So at the end of this discussion, I'm fine with that.
Oh, no, you can do it right now.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say I'm loving being here in Inwood. It's great to be a part of this great team here at Holy Trinity. And I know that Father Dell did an enormous amount of work to make sure that the project was taken with the community's concern, and I really admire that. And I hope the community board feels that they can always talk to me or any one of the parish leaders. There's several here. There's Kelly, there's Pia and Pat, who are all here on the board. Please, my door is open. Be in touch with me. It's great to be in a building that is ADA compliant, has a low carbon footprint, and has rooms that are designed for community use. That's what we're here for. So if you know of people who are looking for space, please have them get in touch with us, and we'll try to figure out whether or not this is the right space for them. And last, I want to say that Artemis has been, in my experience, very responsive, and I'm very pleased with that. And I look forward to continuing to figure out how we can enhance how this project can support the community as well. That's all.
Okay, thank you. So I just like
Gallon delay, by the way.
Gallon delay.
That's it. Yeah.
So my question to the to my committee members is the BSA application is asking for relief from the off-street parking and from the maximum building height. Is there a resolution that someone would like to offer with respect to the proposed relief?
I would like to move that we support the application with maybe a couple of provisos. Number one, that we would urge the developer to increase the amount of affordable apartments, and at the same time ask that the BSA not hold that against them in any way. And number two, that we would urge them to meet with the adjoining neighbors in the buildings on Seaman Avenue and have an ongoing dialogue with them during the construction process. And number three would be that we would ask them to come back to us at some point when the building is further designed so that we can see how it actually will look.
Is there?
I second what Steve has said.
Okay. So there is a motion on the floor to support the application with the provisos that were listed by Steve. It was seconded by Jim. For the committee members in favor, you can actually raise your hand. Will be easier. I can just count it that way. So those in favor? I think we've lost Omar. Opposed? Actually, take your hands down now so we don't double count. Tanya, your hand's still up. Any opposed? Abstaining? Okay. And members of the community may also vote if they would wish. So I guess that would be any members of the congregation or neighbors who are here. So if anyone would like to vote on the resolution, we'll first take votes in favor. Okay, I see 1, 2, let me go back up. 3. Okay, take your hands down. Any members of the public opposed or abstaining? Okay, so there we have it.
Again, and Wayne, just for clarity's sake, you know that when I refer to affordable apartments, I'm referring to affordable to residents of Washington Heights and Inwood.
Steve, you don't need to tell me that.
I take it back.
Benjamin, thank you so much for a very respectful hearing tonight. We greatly appreciate it, and we'll be seeing you a lot over the next year or so.
We look forward to seeing you. And as a matter of fact, with regard to the church, if the space is large enough, maybe one of our committees might like to hold a meeting there.
Absolutely. You're invited, please, at any time. We'd love to do that.
Sounds wonderful.
What is the capacity of the sanctuary?
The sanctuary can seat 180 people. Of course, during the pandemic, that would be reduced, but and then for a party, 100. So,
Well, when things return to normal, maybe we can have a full board meeting there.
absolutely, yes.
As long as it's accessible, that would be great.
It is. There's an elevator. It's beautiful.
This would be one of the few locations in Inwood that is accessible.
That's true.
We always have a great deal of difficulty finding a place in Inwood that's fully accessible.
Again, thank you so much.
You're
Thank you very much.
You all be safe and well.
Same to you.
Bye.
Thank you. Nice to meet everyone. Have a good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn at 9:26?
I move we adjourn at 9:26.
Is there any objection to that?
Yeah, I move we adjourn at 9:27.
Okay, well, you have to be difficult. Take care, all.
Bye-bye. Good job.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone.